Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another one here. This one based on one of your newer suggestions. Lots of great suggestions this go around on the new ones. I haven't had a chance to go to some of the past ones yet because a lot of the stuff I'm reading is just very interesting to share, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying these videos too, all these new suggestions. So this one has to do with a very interesting encounter with the fact that it involves not just four people that witnessed it in terms of the face-to-face interaction with the UFO, but there was another, in this case, witness on the ground as well, and then yet one more witness in a nearby house too. So multiple witnesses, each one seeing, in this case, what occurred with this UFO encounter, and all of them basically stating the very same thing. Even though they didn't know one another, they all told the very same information. So lots of credibility associated with this UFO encounter, and it has to do with this. It's known as the Mansfield, Ohio UFO encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the rich information associated with this unique experience. So what was, in this case, this Mansfield, Ohio UFO encounter? Well, it was something that occurred a couple of decades back. You have to go specifically to October 18th, 1973, to be specific, there in Mansfield, Ohio, hence the name, essentially, of the encounter. And it happened once again late at night. A lot of my other UFO encounters seem to follow this theme, where UFOs seem to love going out there in the nighttime. It makes you wonder, is it something like a conscious choice? The fact that they are less seen in the nighttime, because they could just as easily travel during the day. It just doesn't seem to occur too often. So it makes you seem like it's a purposeful choice. But yes, there in this case, the Mansfield, Ohio area, there was a crew, in this case, a four-man crew that operated a UH-1H helicopter, which you're looking at here. This was a crew that was part of the Army Reserve, and they were doing some regularly scheduled examinations. I guess they were doing, like, maybe just going around, just making sure that things look well, or just doing test runs, whatever was the case. The key was they were coming back, in this case, from Columbus, Ohio, at a timeline of about 10:30 p.m. or so. Everything was normal. There was nothing amiss until this happened. By the way, this was all on a 100% crystal clear night. So no moon out there, in other words, to try to dispel, the notion that, oh, they just saw moonlight, they just saw a reflection of the moon. No, there was like lightning or thunder or clouds that would get in the way of the descriptions. No, it was 100% crystal clear night, the only illumination in this case coming from the stars. So there they were, coming back, in this case in their UH-1H helicopter, going at an altitude of about 2,500 feet. This four-man crew consisted of a Lieutenant Arrigo Jezzi, a Sergeant John Healy, Special Ops or Special 5, a guy by the name of Robert Yanisek, and then in this case the captain was Lawrence J. Coney. So all of them were just doing their usual routine. When closer to about 11 o'clock, one of them noticed this. They noticed like a red light heading south, in this case from their left direction. So this was something where they didn't expect it, because there was no other traffic in the air, traffic in the sense of other flights, and no anticipated or unannounced traffic either. But sure enough, they saw this red light, which they considered it a single, like a steady red light going across the horizon. And on top of that, about half a minute later, this red light seemed to have noticed them, because now, instead of cruising off on the horizon towards the left, it turned and then started coming straight towards them. So at that point, the captain took over the controls, and then he decided, let's go ahead and let's go in a descent. And they went into, I guess, not a too fast descent, but it was about 500 feet per minute. Just in case, though, the captain got on the phone, because I'm sorry, on the radio, to contact, in this case, the base that he was coming to, because he wanted to make sure, was there any other traffic out there, anything else that could possibly explain this red light. Unfortunately, though, it seems like there was something that as soon as before he got the response back as to the answer, yes, no, it was cut off. So the transmission, everything was just completely lost. No matter what channel or frequency they change, nothing was communicating back and forth. They were on their own. And then this red light actually gained more speed. It actually went almost like on a collision course straight to them. You can imagine at this point going from seeing nothing to seeing a red light far away to seeing this light coming towards them and now accelerating and clearly going on a collision course. They were a little bit, freaking out. Not not freaking out in the sense that they were handling it, but they knew that this was 100%, something else that's could be completely dangerous. So they instead now they descended at a faster rate, in this case 2,000 feet per minute, and they got down pretty close to the ground. In this case, 1,700 feet. So, and they were just about maybe 600 feet or so above the nearest treetops. And just when it seemed like it was going to be the final moments, in this case with this object, this red light, whatever it was, about to ram them at a very high speed, it stopped. It actually just stopped mid-air, just like this, just like a snap. It stopped right in front of them. Just a complete deceleration. Obviously, nothing really on Earth could do something like that. Now, without some serious ramifications, not just for the actual plane or whatever it was, but the humans inside. But no, this is something else completely different. So there it was, hovering right above them, and they got to see it in all of its glory. That's why I was saying earlier, this is a very credible set, an encounter, because here you have four people, all of them respected men within the military, all of them seeing this. Here's how they described it. It was a cigar-shaped object large enough to cover the entire windshield, the viewpoint of the windshield of the helicopter. So it was that close. It had this gray metallic appearance to it, although it might have been a little hard to see it because, again, this was during the nighttime and just the starlight illuminating it. But they saw plenty of it still, because there was this like a red light on the front of, if you could call it a nose of whatever this thing is, and then B, a white light, a pretty strong one, coming up from the tail, from the opposite end of whatever this thing was. And as it was hovering above them, a strange thing occurred. Like in this case, while it was in front of them, this green beam came out from the lower part of its back end, almost as what you could consider like the fuselage associated with this craft. When I heard the green beam, I immediately started thinking, like, imagine like a tractor beam, something along those lines. This green beam actually was able to swing around. That was interesting too when I was reading it, because it made it seem like this beam almost had like a life of its own, like it wasn't just a straight beam, like it could almost curve and find its target. Very interesting stuff, no? Because that's, again, on a completely different level of anything that we have here in this world. And this green beam hit this helicopter straight on. So this entire helicopter, the inside of it, the outside of it, everything, these four witnesses, they all stated that everything was just completely bathed in this intense green light. So you could imagine something like that, where this light, whatever it was just completely taking things over. Interestingly enough, there was still no noise coming from, in this case, the craft, no noise either coming from the green light. It was just silence from them. And then that was it afterwards. And this whole experience, at least from starting point to what happened next, was a few minutes. After those moments, this thing decided to move off. And I was reading this information and I kind of got the sense of it, but maybe I'm kind of wrong, who knows. But the way I was reading it was, as this thing was moving, it seems like this green beam, if you call it a tractor beam, was dragging them with them. So this thing, wherever it was taking them, was heading towards another area, towards Lake Erie. And even though the helicopter, in this case the captain, was pointing the helicopter still towards that descent, the helicopter itself was clearly going on a raised level. So in other words, it was reading a higher climb of rate of about 1,000 feet per minute. So clearly this thing was, whatever this UFO was in control, and it was taking them up to a specific elevation. And then after about a certain point, in this case the captain noted that after about 3,800 feet, that's when it seemed like he was given control back. Like in this case, the helicopter, he was able to move it again. He was able to control its ascent or descent, and then they noticed that too because there was a slight bump. And then at that point, this thing, whatever it was, this UFO, decided to move across very fast. In this case, it moved towards another area, and at that exact point, they were able to make radio contact with their base. So almost like in this case, there was something there, like the connection, whatever it was that was blocking it, was turned off, and they were allowed to have contact with it again. As far as this UFO and what happened to it, it basically just moved away. It turned at a 45-degree angle, and then that was it. Like it was gone. It seemed to fly very, very fast afterward. So pretty interesting. That was their encounter with this thing altogether, from the very first time they saw it to that controlled ascent, in this case, until they were kind of like let go, if you could use that in quotations. Then it was about maybe 5 minutes in total, but still definitely something where they realized, this was nothing from this world. This was completely otherworldly, and they weren't the only witnesses. Remember, I was mentioning earlier, it was them in the actual helicopter, and then there were witnesses on the ground. So sure enough, at around the same time, there was a mother and her 4 children that were driving to their nearby home. As they did so, they too also saw that bright red light, in this case heading towards a specific direction. From their area, it was heading towards south. And then when they saw that, they saw it stop, they saw the green light come out of it, and then they saw it bathe, in this case, the helicopter. So they saw this confrontation, if you could call it that. And when they did so, they got out, they went to look to see what happened. All they did was they heard the sounds of the helicopter, but nothing else. But they definitely saw this thing, whatever it was, especially with that bright green light now emanating from it, clearly. And they saw, of course, the helicopter just completely covered with it. Then they saw the ascent, in this case, from the helicopter being caught in whatever that beam was going upwards. So they witnessed all of this from their vantage point. And again, this was all just pure happen chance. Nobody knew each other, in this case, as far as the people in the helicopter and then the people on the ground. But both of them obviously saw what happened. And there was one more witness too, someone else that was at a nearby home. In this case, a person who was watching the news just nonchalantly heard what was the sound, in this case, of a very distinct Army helicopter. Maybe they were in the Army themselves, or were, whatever was the case. They knew there was the sound of an Army helicopter, but from their perspective, inside the home, it sounded so close that it almost like it was going to crash into their house. Remember, I was mentioning earlier in the original descent, the helicopter went so low to the ground, just about maybe 600 feet from above it, that it must have sounded really, really loud to some of the nearby homes. So that got them to go outside and try to take a look. And when they did so, they also saw that bright green light, in this case coming from the skyline, but they saw it actually from their bedroom. So this thing was bright enough to actually cover not just most of the sky, but bathe, in this case, into someone's home, and then go into the bedroom itself. Interesting stuff, and isn't it? Like, it made me wonder back, about that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that very famous scene where you have that very strong light, in this case hitting one of the homes, one of the doorways. It maybe just harken back to that famous scene. So yet another encounter from another witness, again seeing the very same time frame as the other two, in this case from the ground and of course from the helicopter, all experiencing at the same time. As far as what happened to the UFO, no one else saw it afterward. It just zoomed off and then that was it. No other appearance, it seemed like, in that location there in Mansfield after 1973. If it has come back, it's been pretty discreet, but whatever this thing was doing, it almost was like inspecting the helicopter. Maybe it was studying it, maybe it was analyzing it. In the Star Trek episodes, you always hear about that, how one of the other ships is scanning the ship itself, like the Enterprise, and so maybe this thing was doing the very same thing too. Why it would take it back up in this case to its regular altitude like it was before, maybe it was doing it as a courtesy, who knows. But once it finished the inspection, then that was it. It was gone. Nobody saw it again. So if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, please post those comments below. Anybody there from Mansfield? There's got to be some people out there that are some of you fans, some of my fans out there that have to be there. Family members, coworkers. I was actually reading some other articles where yes, people that lived there knew these four guys and then were able to talk back about what happened in the city afterward, after this encounter and the buzz it created. So I'd love to hear if anyone has any more such comments such as that. Anybody like friends or other family members that knew these guys or knew about the encounter itself. So please share those comments. I'd love to be able to see them, and everyone else would too. So all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.